Welcome back to Trust Your Eyes. The top 8 sides all played each other this round and the ladder positions once again shifted heavily. To start, we go to the first game of the round. Melbourne almost stole Thursday night's game against Carlton. Petrarca was electric with 5 goals, but the Blues led by Cripps and Walsh were too good. What is the biggest takeaway from the game? Well, I think for me we have to focus on the Melbourne forward line, which still has its ongoing issues, and has to be Petrarca. 5 goals, he was just phenomenal. He's like a cat watching him on the field. He can bounce around everywhere, up in the air and on the ground, and he got tagged out of the game by Kennedy, who did a terrific job. But when they put him forward, we just saw how unstoppable he is. So I think it's something they need to invest at looking at. Oliver's getting back to form. They still have Viney, and they can put in Tom Sparrow, who's still growing as a player. And Trent Rivers is someone I've been calling out for a little while. Big body, 6'2". That's a great replacement for Petrarca in terms of physical size. And he's very skillful as well. Not only does Petrarca kick those 5 goals, but just eases the pressure on everyone around him. Will no doubt help out Van Rooyen and Petty and Keziah Pickett and the other small. So I think it's something that Melbourne really should be looking at. They did it last year for a period of time, and Petrarca kicked a lot of goals, and I think he can do it again. Some side notes, I just thought it was a game against 2 very good teams. I know I go on about Melbourne's forward line, but they are still good. Both defences for the teams is fantastic, and I think these sides will be seeing at the end of the season again, possibly in preliminary final week and onwards. On the Friday night, Port Adelaide won at Geelong for the first time since 2007. Without captain Connor Rozee, they held off a 9-goal second half from the Cats to hand them 2 losses in a row. Does this result say more about Port Adelaide or Geelong? Well, I'm still a big believer in Geelong, so I'm not too concerned about them at this stage of the year. So I'm going to focus on Port Adelaide. A lot of people criticise them for not winning the big games, and it kind of is true in finals, but I can't remember a better home and away win for this Port Adelaide team without their captain. I think it showed a few things. Without Rozee, Horne-Francis got even more time in the midfield, and him and Butters at times were electric. They even put the sub Mullen, I think from Geelong, on Horne-Francis to tag him for a fair bit of the game, and he still got well over 20 touches and big impact. Zach Butters is just an absolute star. We've known that for a while, and I thought Ollie Wines, he looked like a Brownlow medalist out there for the first time in a couple seasons. Wasn't pretty, but you know how it is. Contested ball, feeding it out to those runners in Butters and Horne-Francis. He was fantastic. Focusing on Geelong, I still think they're in a good position. They're managing the team well, but they do have a tough test next week in the Northern Territory against Gold Coast. They are favoured, but they will be without Tom Hawkins, who's getting a rest, and Jeremy Cameron with that head knock. So I will probably be tipping Gold Coast in that game because they play that stadium, TIO, really well. So I actually think that Geelong will probably lose 3 games in a row, but I still have confidence in them in the long run. We're going to skip forward all the way to Sunday afternoon as Adelaide and Brisbane finished equal on 90 points. The broadcast team said through the later stages that a draw would be no good to either side. Do you agree or disagree? I'm going to disagree with the broadcast team, which was Dwayne Russell was the main person saying that a draw isn't any good. I think it is because 2 points is better than no points. It's a glass half full output, but it keeps both of the sides within 2 games of the top 8 instead of one being within 1 game and one being 3 out, which means you're in big trouble at this stage of the year, even though it is still relatively early. So I think both sides will be pretty happy with that result because they're still in the mix. Now for the game itself, I did think Adelaide were going to win. So Brisbane's still copping a lot of criticism, but they have a lot of new players coming in, a lot of guys I've never heard of. That Logan Morris seems to be a little bit of a player, kind of bobs up with a goal here and there. So they're still trying to find some chemistry with these younger guys. And a lot of their veterans are still at 70% of what they really can be. So I did think Adelaide was going to win. Even when they were 3 goals down, I was still feeling relatively confident that they could get some momentum. For the Crows, I think Rankin is becoming not just a star, but a superstar right now. And the other little matchup I watched through the game was Saligo against Lachie Neale. I thought Saligo won that duel, both a similar type of players, but I think Adelaide is still heading in the right direction. And if I could kind of pick a team right now, which one I'd feel more confident in making the top 8, I'm going to pick the Adelaide Crows at this stage. St Kilda lost by 5 points to Hawthorn in Tasmania, and they have lost 4 of their last 5 games, while GWS got overrun by Essendon, and they have lost 3 of their past 4 games. Which side is in more trouble right now? I'm going to go with the obvious answer here, and it's St Kilda, who are just playing without a little bit of life, which we saw last year and the start of this season. Because remember, they just lost to Geelong at the Cattery, and they beat Collingwood, and they also just lost to Essendon, which in hindsight looks like as good a loss as you can have right now. They're just a bit boring, slow, especially the midfield. I know other analysts like David King have been kind of preaching that they need to add a bit more flair and speed in the midfield, and I think it's fair at this point. I still think defensively they're okay. People are saying they can't stop the opposition, but Hawthorn only scored 58 points or so, and they've been okay in that space for the whole of the season. I think it's the forward line that's the big issue if we park that midfield setup. Max King, he's just a bit of a question mark right now. He's frustrating. He's kind of been figured out, it seems, by defenders. And then other guys like Tim Membry is just out of form. Without Jack Higgins, they look terrible in that small forward position. It's not the end of the world, though, because what can happen in these kind of situations is this is a little bit of a lag with the young talent. There was a lot of talk about Owens, Windhager, Wanganeen, Malira taking huge strides and becoming superstars, but sometimes there can be a year or two lag before they burst onto the scene. So I wouldn't panic if you're a St Kilda fan. I don't think you'll be playing finals, but it's not all doom and gloom. And I think the list as a whole is in a better position than what people are saying. In that Giants game, Essendon controlled the affair from quarter time onwards. Are the Bombers finally legit and a top 4 contender? I was pretty bullish with Essendon coming into the season. I thought they'd be around the mark for a top 8, but they've probably blown expectation away from me. I didn't think they'd be this good this quickly, and there's been a lot of improvement from kind of no-name players. They're at this stage a definite top 4 contender. They've got North Melbourne and Richmond next week, and I can't remember their exact draw, but it's generally pretty soft compared to a few of the other top sides. So I think they're well in the mix for top 4 at this stage. The recruits have all been stars. I know Dersma's out, but Mackay, what a difference he's made. Goldstein has given them such a solid ruck, and then Gresham's been that spark guy in the forward line, which they've needed for some time. The improvement is across the board. I think Merritt's impacting even more than he did last year. Andrew McGrath, if I had to pick a small lockdown and running a kind of two-way defender, I think he's number 1 at the moment. And then Sam Durham, who has come out of nowhere. I thought at the back end of last year they'd found a solid wingman, and he's become an inside kind of machine, and he still has plenty of growth to happen. And the other thing that's growing behind the scenes is the supportive base. Slowly but surely, I think this is a Richmond and Carlton type of thing, and Collingwood you can throw in, where they're getting momentum not only on the field through the players and the coaching staff, but also outside with the fan base. So Essendon's in a great spot, and a few more wins, and I think I might be saying I expect them to finish top 4 at the end of the season. The Western Bulldogs pummeled Richmond at the MCG on Saturday night to ease the pressure on the club. The Tigers also caught more injury carnage and simply can't take a trick. But one of the stories of the night was Sam Darcy's career-high 4 goals. Is he the rising star frontrunner right now? You know what, you can call me biased here because I'm a Bulldog supporter, but right now I would have Sam Darcy as the absolute rising star winner. I'm not a betting man, but I've looked at some of the odds, and Harley Reid is basically guaranteed to win it if you go to any sport bookie, which I can't quite understand. Now, to get a couple things off my chest, for me, the rising star should probably be the best first or second year player. Now, Darcy will be 21, so if you want to say he should be ruled out because of his age, I can't really argue with you because I agree with that. But in the reality, he's eligible, and that's what we've got in front of us. I'll give you Reid's peak games against Sydney and that obvious game against West Coast have been great. But the rest of his numbers have been okay, kind of mid-teens with a few clearances here and there. It is easier as a midfielder. I know that the voters probably won't take that into account, but it's something to keep kind of your mind on. And in terms of ranking points, Reed's only averaging 4 more than Darcy, and he's playing midfield and forward, where Darcy's basically a key forward and 25-30% ruckman. He's kicked 16 goals, Darcy. At times he looks better than Norton and Jamara. 4 goals on the weekend. I know against bad opposition, but right now if I had to vote, Sam Darcy would be my rising star winner because he's having a pretty special season. To finish off, Collingwood cruised past West Coast to move into the top 8. Even with injuries to key players, the Pies look to be back on track and they are just a game outside the top 4. This is a little more open-ended because there's quite a bit to go over with Collingwood. I think the injuries are a huge concern and people are just blowing over at this point because they got a pretty tough schedule coming up. There's no Elliott, Myercheck, DeGoey, Mitchell, Howe at this point, and we know Nathan Murphy's retired, so they're pretty depleted in every line. There's a couple things with the coaching I think they've done well. Lipinski's getting a little more on ball time. He's been great. And then guys like Sullivan have come in and had instant impact. Sidebottom down in defence, kind of as a roaming halfback's gotten his form back up, his confidence, because they can use his ball use in that position perfectly. And majority of their lesser likes are playing well, but there is a big but. They got Adelaide at the MCG next week, which is no easy game. They got Fremantle away, then the Western Bulldogs at Marvel. So they got a few awkward games there against teams currently in a pretty similar spot to them. So I think that Collingwood will be tested for their depth as any team would with the amount of injuries they have. But if there is a time to have players hurt, it's right now. So Collingwood's an interesting watch, but I'm not as green on them as some other people at this point in the season. Thanks for listening to the Round 9 edition of Trust Your Eyes. Good luck with your teams next week, and I'll be back soon.